And this Pacific team is all right. I want to kind of start with saying that a lot of times, myself included, the Tigers get overlooked. Pacific gets overlooked for a lot of reasons. One, I think because they many times have finished toward the bottom of the league since they rejoined the WCC, but also because they haven't had like that marquee player, that marquee star that you kind of look at and say, yeah, that's the guy. Because even when they were finishing top half of the league for a few years, really who everyone looked at was Damon Stoudemire. So finding the player, finding the guys that are going to make the difference for this Pacific team, I think it's not as hard, but it's like you a lot of times forget because they don't not every last one of them jumps off the screen at you, and part of that comes along with team success as well. And this Pacific team did finish tied for fifth a year ago. I think that a lot of times gets lost. This team did finish tied with BYU at 7-9. They finished 15-18. So they were below 500 in Leonard Perry's second year. So going into year three. So big things to look at from a year ago. What this team did well, did not do well. This team was the best 3-point shooting team in the WCC. They were a 39% 3-point shooting team. A lot of that was from Luke Avdalovich. Like he was a big component of that 3-point shooting barrage. Another key strength of this Pacific team a year ago was their depth. This was a team that had 7 of its top 10 players average more than 13 minutes a game. Or sorry, actually, it was 10 players who averaged 13 or more minutes per game a year ago. 7 of those guys returned. So there's a lot of depth to this squad. And I think that's another thing. Again, just the way this team plays, like you're not going to see one look as often as you might see with some other teams. Obviously, think about Gonzaga, St. Mary's. A lot of their guys are going to be playing 30 plus minutes a game. You won't see that with Pacific. You're going to see a lot of different combinations and amalgamations of this team and the roster pieces that they have. Those were some of the things they did really well a year ago. But this was a terrible rebounding team. They had the worst rebounding margin in the WCC at negative 5.3 per game. And it got worse in WCC play at minus 7.1. Largely because the Pacific is not a big team. They don't have a lot of size. And they didn't a year ago. However, they do bring in a couple of pieces that they hope are going to help solve that, or they're going to see more minutes for some of the pieces that they hope are going to solve that. Mekhi Richards, who did get some minutes a year ago, he was a transfer from Eastern Washington last year. 6'10", 225. He's going to get a good amount of the run. One of the newcomers in Burke Smith from Boise State, he's going to get a lot more of that run and get a lot of those minutes. So there's going to be added size to this Pacific team, which should hopefully help them on the rebounding front. But we know it's not just the centers. That's going to be a collective team effort to be able to really hit the boards and to do more with the team that they have. One of the interesting pieces I really liked a year ago was Mo Odom. Sophomore does come back. I really liked what we saw from him toward the end of the season. Last 19 games of the year, he had 15 games where he had 4 or more assists, 9 where he had 5 or more. Double-digit score in 4 of his last 6 games, including 22 against Pepperdine. And I know Pepperdine was not a good defensive team, but still, this is a kid who's really starting to kind of come into his own, really starting to figure it out. His averages for the year, it was like he had 5.6 points per game, 3.5 assists in only 15 minutes. So I think we're going to see a lot of really nice things from Odom going into this season. I think we're going to see him develop a lot into that star point guard that Pacific has not had in a while. So it's going to be really exciting to see his development and where he goes. And then similarly is Tyler Beard. and what he can do. Last year, he played 22 minutes a game. Again, we talked about this. A lot of guys who played a lot of minutes. 9.1 points per game, near 43% from three. I'm really excited to kind of see where he goes. He started 11 games last year of those, and let's see. Sorry, I'm looking at just reading the numbers. So yeah, he started 11 games last year, 22 minutes per game. It's going to be really exciting to kind of see what he's able to do, how he starts to fit into the rest of the puzzle. One of the guys that Coach Perry is really excited by is LaShawn Hallam's coming over from South Carolina State. So he'll bring some senior leadership to the squad, which does need it. They don't have, this is a younger team that Pacific will have going into the year. Because you don't have the likes of Kalen Boone, Jordan Ivy Carter, Luke Avdalovich, already mentioned he's gone. So you have some of your senior leadership, your more veteran leadership having moved on. Even Brooke Smith coming in, like he's a redshirt junior, so he's been in college basketball for a while. So between he and Hallam's, there's going to be a lot of leadership there. Hallam started 20 games a year ago. He averaged north of 10 and a half a game. He was a double-figure scorer 13 times and had 20 or more 3 times for South Carolina State. So again, like this Pacific team is going to be an interesting watch. I think that they finished 5th year ago. I don't see that this year. I think that what the other teams in the league have done to improve their rosters, I think makes that a tough ask, a tough challenge for this team to reach that height, and get up there. I don't think that this Pacific team really has that level of a ceiling, but they're going to have opportunities early on to test themselves. They do have Sam Houston State. They're going to be at Cal, at Nevada, at Fresno State. This Pacific team is not, I think that they have a shot. It's not like that they're not going to win anything. I do think this Pacific team is talented. This Pacific team is going to be tough, just like they have been the last few years. Keep in mind that this was a Pacific team that had Gonzaga on the ropes in Stockton last year. That was, I think, just days before they ended up losing to LMU. Gonzaga losing to LMU, I mean. So where do I see Pacific? Where do I see this team kind of falling in the giant pecking order? I think this is still going to be a building year. I don't know if they quite get to 500 this year because I do think they're going to struggle a little bit more in conference play. I think that the ceiling for this team is maybe getting above 500, like maybe a few games above. The ceiling, I think, could be also 6th place in the WCC. I think that they could finish just behind that trio in the middle. So I think they can leapfrog Portland. I think they can get above Pepperdine. San Diego, I think, is the clear 10 with the way just their roster is set up and the way everyone else's roster is set up right now. But I think the floor is probably the floor for them if everything goes wrong is 9th in the WC, or sorry, not 9, there's 10 now teams. 8th place in the WCC. I don't see that happen. I think they are probably closer to 7th right now than they are to 8th. And I do think there's a better chance of them finishing above 500 than there is below 500. But I do think the floor is them finishing probably 5-6 games below 500. They did finish 3 games below 500 this past year. So if everything goes wrong, we know what it could look like. If everything goes right, who knows? Like they could actually flip some of these games that they didn't particularly play well in last year. That rebounding margin is a huge thing to try to fix and to work on. If that becomes a positive, if that becomes not necessarily a strength, but not something that is a detriment, that could also really change a lot of their fortunes going into throughout the season, going into the season, and how that looks. So Pacific somewhere 7 to 8 in conference, 6 to 8, I should say, in conference. And I'll do a more full breakdown of where I think the standings are going to be in just a couple weeks. So when we get there, I'll dive into all of that. Pacific, I think, is just a fascinating team to watch. I think there's a lot of talent on this team to keep an eye on. It may not be the flashiest. It may not be the team we pay attention to because somehow they get lost in the shuffle. But much like last year, don't sleep on Pacific because team slept on them a year ago and they ended up surprising some people. So keep an eye on the Tigers. Do not completely dismiss them out of hand.